I think the stronger that people are in their cultural identity, their te reo, the way their tikanga, their role that they have within the iwi, that I think the more they get closer to that, because every time I feel that I'm closer to that, I feel I'm a better Ngāti Whātua person.
The biggest city in the country, the most ethnically diverse centre in Aotearoa, New Zealand, is the homeland of Renata Blair and the people of Ngāti Whātua Orākei. This is his iwi, and they are doing more than just surviving right now. They are indeed flourishing. This is their story, and the story of Renata Blair, Indigenous 100. Taku hiru hāpainga. Ngāti Whātua Orākei e kara Renata tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe.
I te mea mana whenua koe I kone e mihi atu ana. I te mea kei kone I tāu e whakapāho ana I tēnei ata. I tēnei wā, no reira ka nui te mihi atu ki a koe. So, look, I reckon we get all our cards on the table here, right?
Okay.
You're a Blues fan. I'm a Hurricanes fan. You're a North Harbour fan. I'm a Wellington fan. I think it's a statement of fact that the Blues have been the worst team in New Zealand for a number of years now.
Couple.
A number. So we'll never agree on that. I think it's a statement of fact. We'll put that on the table. But I'll go back to the 1990s because you and your bro Ngāti, you were like legends of New Zealand touch. All right? I don't know if you remember, but back in the days there used to be this magazine that went out to all the school kids, you know, secondary schools and what have you. It was called Tearaway. There are a couple of photos of you and the bro, and you're in the New Zealand touch team and stuff like that. It's an amazing story how you've gone from that to being where you are now.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to those days. Were you ever interested when you were at secondary school, coming out of secondary school, were you interested in iwi politics? Were you interested in what was happening with Ngāti Whātua?
Yeah, I guess when we were growing up, politics was part of the household. Mum was very heavily involved in the marae. Dad, obviously, a Pākehā from heritage in the South Island, but coming to Helensville, he had a passion for te reo and for te ao Māori. And so, them being community-oriented people, we'd always be involved in political discussions around the dinner table or taken along to the marae. Mum starting projects around cultural identity or te reo or weaving or doing that type of mahi. So, yeah, I guess it's part of our, the Blair household and, being Davises from Orākei, it was a real key part. But yes, I guess it's been part of our life for a long time.
What was it like having those discussions with your mum and dad about politics? Was it always about what happened at Takaparafa, or was it about the history of Ngāti Whātua, or what happened in those discussions? What were you discussing?
Yeah, I guess in the 70s in Helensville where we grew up, which was another hapu of Ngāti Whātua, there's 5 marae there, so we were always kind of in and around marae, trying to build the marae up. We were kind of observers at that time, just little kids always taken along to the wharenui. And mum and dad were, at those times in the 70s, the reo was almost completely extinguished in Helensville. There were only a few of our kaumātua speaking the reo and from other tribes that were there. So mum and dad were trying their best to try and revive it.
Why? Why were they trying so hard to do that, particularly with you kids, right? So Trace,
yeah.
You, Mihi, Tui, I know there's another sister, I've left out a couple. Ngās, Ngāti.
Yeah,
why?
Yeah.
Why was that so important to them?
If I had to ask them, they'd just say it's part of our heritage and our cultural identity, and plus they knew that there'd be a place for us in the future, and they took their place. Yeah, I think just with our whānau and who, the whakapapa we have within Ngāti Whātua with mum and her father and great-grandfather and grandfather, quite important, significant leaders within Ngāti Whātua. So they're always wanting us to groom us in that space. So you'll see all the kids have taken a role in, whether it's in the kaipara or whether it's in Orākei and Tāmaki in the iwi space. So yeah, they were real role models for us, especially Dad, Pākehā, speaking te reo, in Kapahaka, you know, he did a bit of carving. He was the hangi man of Helensville as well. So, you know, he was a great role model for us growing up. And then Mum they were both in Manutaki in the 70s. So,
oh wow,
yeah, they were kind of foundation members that went through there with Papa Pita and, you know, Auntie Aroha, and that whole time, which was a real hard time, I thought, for Māori to represent within Aotearoa. So yeah, quite groundbreaking, I thought.
What did they say they wanted you to do when you grew up? What did they want of you as kids?
Yeah, it's a funny thing that me personally, they didn't really need to push me that much. I was always competitive from a young guy.
Where's that come from?
I don't know, I think just watching Mum and Dad play sport, they were very active in rugby, netball, touch, wakaama, so we're always inbred, and I just always had a competitive edge growing up, or, you know, within sports or whatever it was with all my mates and that in Helensville. So yeah, I guess watching Mum and Dad compete, especially Dad in rugby, you know, he'd always massive passion for our rugby club in Helensville. So yeah, I guess they didn't really say, oh, this is your pathway. They just kind of role modelled it.
So when you guys, particularly, and going back again to you and Ngāti Mū in those days when you're starting to play touch and you're playing against the likes of Peter Walters and all those guys, and there's a point to this, and I'll get to that eventually, right? Yeah. But you're playing against all the best touch players in New Zealand. You guys eventually, I think, make the New Zealand touch team, right? Yeah. Playing alongside all those legends. Yeah. Where's the drive? I know you talked about the fact that your father played rugby and all that kind of stuff, but where was the drive to kind of compete at that level? Where was that? How was that manifest? Where did that come from?
Yeah, it's a question. At that time,
I heard you and Ngaz were running up hills and sand dunes and
stuff. Yeah. Oh, we're pretty active as young guys, and Dad would always be very active, you know, in terms of training and setting goals and for rugby season or touch. But we were groomed by a group of dads out there. We got 3 sets of brothers together, and we'd play touch every day after school. And then we just developed a real kind of core group of guys called the Brothers, and then that's where we were born out of. So, you know, you eventually, the amount of time that you train together, the amount of systems or whatever that you employ in your team, you eventually win some tournaments. Then we'd venture out of Helensville and we won on the Whangaparoa. Then we'd go into the city and win at Massey. And then eventually you're representing North Harbour and then competing against Peter Walters, who at that time was at his prime.
He was a god, right? He was a god, not just of touch, he was a god of New Zealand sport, right?
Yeah. If you look at Peter, yeah, exactly. Peter Touch he's Mr. Touch. Yeah. You know, he's the legend of.
Still is, right?
Still is. You know, and still in superb shape and still running out there. So, and what a great community man too. Yeah. But yeah, competing against them when they were the national champs for like 10 years, you know, we were the first team to really take them down, and I guess all the training and all the relationships you build within your team and you execute them on the field, then you know, if you do things properly, then you're going to win. So yeah, we kind of got groomed by some pretty good dads and pretty good coaches over the years. So
what did you learn out of those kind of processes going through touch, right, that still potentially still apply to what you're doing now? Yeah. We'll eventually get to what you're doing now, but what did you learn out of that discipline related to touch sport that you've kind of held on to, that carried on going with you as you kind of went under your own field of endeavour? And
yeah, for me, playing sport, everybody's got a role on the field and you work hard to craft your role. And so when you're on touch, everybody's got their role to play at the highest level, and you kind of rely on them to perform there and execute their role. So in business, I expect that from business too, that people perform their particular role to achieve a goal. So yeah, a lot of discipline is, you know, my job as the captain of the teams has always been to try and harness the best players to play their particular role within a system. So it's naturally translated over to business, where if everyone has got their particular role, here's the goal we're trying to achieve, and And if I've got a leadership role in that, it's trying to harness that team together.
The reason why this is interesting for me is because right along that journey you've undertaken, your brother's kind of been there.
Yeah.
By the way, you're the older brother, right? You're
Yeah, I'm the older
Tuakana.
brother, yeah.
Doesn't always appear that way sometimes.
Yeah, Ngāti's always been, from a young age, he's been called the old man. So, yeah, he's always kind of looked a bit serious. And and he took on iwi politics a lot earlier than I did, or iwi, working with the iwi. So,
Why was that?
He's being named Ngātimu. He's always had this thing along, with Ngātimu, the VC, and Ngātimu, the hero from Ngāti Pro. He's always had that weight on him as the young guy, and he's really intelligent. He's always had things. It's like he hasn't had to work too hard to get to where he is, because he's got a lot of intelligence, a lot of natural skill, and he's got his own leadership style too. So. Yeah, we've grown up, I think we were in the same bedroom until we were like 17, 18, and it's just us playing together, whether it's on rugby, touch, or for the iwi. We're like a duo, a partnership.
Must have been robust on occasions though.
Yeah, we've only had kind of like a couple of...
a couple of dust-ups?
Yeah, a couple of dust-ups, but... and I've always felt bad because I've always, won the physical battle. So,
Here we go. By the way, Ngāti was the next guest on the show.
No, he's a man I completely admire and respect, and we've worked out what we're good at and how we work together. And so, I can only remember probably in our teens we've had one, maybe in the 30s one. But we've always walked away, always still loving each other.
Yeah. So your name, Renata, where does that come from?
I was named after a potoro who married mum and dad. Yeah, so they were married in Okahu Bay at Orākei, so they travelled all the way into town to get married, and the whole hapu were there celebrating their marriage. And when I was born, a few years after their marriage, Dad walked out of the hospital and the aupotoro was there on another kaupapa, so he thought it was a tohu. Named Renata, which is Leonard in transliteration.
So he sounds like a really, interesting is not the right word, he sounds like your father I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Like an amazing guy. Because you're right, he originally came from, was it Hokitika? Or Greymouth?
Greymouth, yeah. Born in Greymouth. His mother's heritage is in Invercargill, father in Wellington. Went to Teachers College. But he'd always do things like he'd climb mountains and hike and kind of travel throughout New Zealand. He'd hitchhike, and he was kind of a really independent person, and had his own whakaaro about a lot of things, but really widely read. He did a lot of reading. We had libraries of books at home, and so he thought very deeply. And if he cared about something or he decided to do something, he'd go, 100% to get there. So amazing man. Named all us kids Māori names. Mum wanted to name us Pākehā names, and Dad said no.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you said that Ngāti got into iwi politics pretty early, right? And you got in a bit later. What was the spur that got you involved in a meaningful, more kind of definitive way in iwi politics? What spurred that?
Yeah, I guess when we moved to the city here, I was 18, and Auckland was a big place really for a boy from Helensville. Helensville was only a town of about 2,000 people, so coming into the city was quite a big move for us. And straight away, Mum threw me into getting onto the education team at Orākei, getting on the wakataua and the kapahaka with Te Puru o Tāmaki, really immersing us in there. And then working alongside a few of our kaumātua and our leaders of the board at the time kind of exposed me to that. So in a way, I was still working in the iwi and driving the education team and strategy at that time, and working along the likes of one of our great kuia, Ani Pihima. So Mum would always immerse us within te ao Māori and te ao Ngāti Whātua. So once I went to Teachers College, I decided to continue, teaching was my passion at that time, and after I went teaching, that lasted about 5 years. I taught at Otahuhu College, which was great, and then St. Peter's College, and then decided a bit of a career change into business and management. So I ended up at AUT, being the corporate events manager.
Why business and management? What was so appealing about it? Because Ngāti Whātua at that time was going through some interesting things, right?
Yeah.
There was a bit of a change in leadership happening as well.
Yeah.
I think Tahu was aging at that time, right?
Yeah.
And things are pretty dynamic at the marae. Did you see an opportunity to be able to do a couple of things at the same time? Being able to help the iwi, but also extend your own body of knowledge, or what was going through your mind at the time that spurred that change in your kind of career?
Yeah, I'd always knew that teaching wasn't the end point for me. I always knew that it was a means to get somewhere. And,
what was the somewhere you were thinking about?
I was more thinking about trying to find what I was good at and using my skills. So it was around building projects, and I really love building projects.
That's based on your sports experience,
That's
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all the way through, you're going back to what you were good at in terms of sport and trying to apply that.
Campaigns, trying to win campaigns, win tournaments, win things like that. So, yeah, so I ended up finding that I was really good at events management, because as a teacher or as a captain of a rugby team, you're always leading people in projects or campaigns. So, yeah, I ended up at AUT, and I think it was about the year 2004, and then I got an opportunity to run things like the Māori Expo, and that really ignited in me a really exposed, 25,000 people celebration of success of Māori, in education, sports, politics, health, really pushing the discussion around Te Ao Māori in Auckland.
See, this is really interesting, because at the same time, 2004, you've got a guy called Don Brash.
Oh yeah.
Who's doing a certain speech at Orewa.
Yeah.
And essentially saying that he wanted a complete change in politics in New Zealand, where you had a Labour government who is trying to close the gaps. He comes out with a speech, the polls start saying that the gap between the government at the time, Labour and National, is closing. Iwi, Māori, becomes the cause du jour within politics, right? At the same time, you're running these kind of expos on Māori success.
Māori success. Yeah, I guess that kind of spurs you, right? When you see stuff like that, and it goes against the grain of what you hear, feel, and touch on the ground. Even with Aucklanders and Kiwis, they don't.
Particularly Auckland.
So, and part of my role as being Ngāti Whātua in the Māori space is actually telling the narrative around. Actually, we've got some amazing success. We're happy to challenge your viewpoints on things, because we've got a body of evidence and leadership that can actually challenge. So, yeah, that kind of stuff, like Don Brash or whoever it is, just really spurs me on, actually.
So what was that like when you're facing kind of a change in people's thinking around the government approach to close the gaps at the time? Don Brash comes out, particularly in Auckland City, and you're running these kind of events, which weren't, let's be honest, weren't just for Māori, right? They also focus on our Pacifica communities, but also trying to ingratiate non-Māori to be a part of our conversation, which is a big part of what you do, taking people on the journey, and actually your whānau. That's what you do. So what were you saying to people who weren't Māori at the time when they're hearing what they're hearing through media? Waitangi Day and Don Brash and all that kind of stuff. What are you saying to try and keep them to be a part of the conversation and a part of the journey?
Yeah, I guess for Māori, it's always about being kai manaki, with Ngāti Whātua you have to be, you got 1 million people on your doorstep, you have to show grace, you have to show hospitality and care, because on the flip side of that, you receive that from them. So when we communicate a message out about Māori success, we're always doing it in a way which is inclusive of the other cultures coming on board. It's never an us versus them type thing with me. I mean, once you get into that battle, I think it just gets the focus changes. So yeah, I preferred at that time to really, put the karanga out to people to come in and celebrate, hear the true story of the history of Māori or Tāmaki, so that people can be part of the journey.
Why be so welcoming, given the history? Why be so ingratiating and gregarious, given what happened here? and particularly what happened to Ngāti Whātua Orākei.
Yeah, I've often, as you go through your journey, you know, you go through times where you're angry or you're really disappointed or you're ready to fight every single fight that comes along the way. But for me, it goes back to us inviting Hobson down here to embrace the new world, which goes back to Titahi and his vision of Hea Te Hau e wawara, he tiu, he raki, you know, the new, what are the winds from the north, you know, nāna ia mai te puputariki, kiuta, you know, there's a shell that's coming into the harbour, you know, and it's a new way, it's a metaphor for a new way of life coming into the harbour. Of the Waitemata ko to ki te Waitemata te Pouwhakairo, so a new carved post will stand in the harbour. So we've always knew, in centuries before the arrival of the Pākehā, that there'd be a new way of life. So we've always had that ingrained into us, that to be ready for change. And I guess for us, it's Api Haitakaua inviting Hobson down here in order to try and develop this partnership and express the Treaty of Waitangi of True Partnership. And you know, it hasn't always, it's been a tough journey because our people, with 1 million people arriving on the shores of the Waitemata, you know, have gone through massive change. The reo's almost died. All their health people died because they polluted the ocean, you know, the harbour. Sickness coming in, alcohol, drugs, all that kind of change, and we've had to survive. And the mechanism that we've survived is through whanaungatanga and keeping together, and also sticking that there will be, in the distance, you know, a change that will see Ngāti Whātua rise to who we truly should be.
So that was in the back of your mind as you're organising these events and getting into a new career and organising Māori Expo in the city? Because I remember they were awesome. I was at AUT at the time, as you know, right? It's just having 30,000 people turn up, and mainly young Māori as well.
Yeah.
What was the moment at which you thought, this is it, this is me, events management, business, this is what I should be doing, because it's ticking all the boxes for me, not just in terms of the commercial sense, but also my own kind of personal ambition, as well as the association with my own iwi, with my own tribe?
Yeah, there's a few moments where you think, you know, and there are a lot of where you want to be and what you know you're good at and how and this is the role you want to play. So the events coordination or project management was where I could really utilise my skills in leadership. And when it all comes together and you've got 150 staff or people working and they're really happy and they're unified, you know, they're performing beyond their real expectations, and they're saying that to you, that's a real kind of key marker for you that things are going pretty good in what you're doing. Whenever Māori Expo is on, I'd always take a moment to look at the kids. The real young tamariki who would be performing and being proud and doing haka and waiata and patere, you know, in Māori. And I thought, I never had that as a kid, you know. None of us, we missed the kohanga reo because I was a bit older. I miss kura kaupapa, I miss whare kura, but to see these kids perform just really, you know, on a stage and a platform with all the cameras and going out to the different media is actually what really makes me feel like I've landed in my right place. And at that time, you know, Māori wasn't very popular, you know, 90s, 2000s, mid 2000s, it was just growing. Whereas today now, you know, people are generally accepting that te ao Māori and expecting these massive performance, whereas Māori Expo is pretty groundbreaking.
It's completely changed now, and again we'll get to this a little bit later on, but you're right, at that time, again, as we say, Brash and all that kind of stuff was happening, but you're right, you had to undergo your own journey, right, of reo, tikanga, you know, acquisition, all that kind of thing. When did that start to become a real sense of purpose for you?
Yeah, because in the 70s and 80s, there was no courses at school, or there was no te reo taught at school, so we were always in the kapahaka teams, you know, with mum and dad. They'd get 20 kids together and we'd all go and perform. So I guess it started there. Being
But with real intent, though, in terms of acquisition, you had to have a real drive for your own journey, yeah?
Yeah.
When did that kind of happen, and why did that happen?
It started at university, actually. Yeah, it was about, we all had to select an extra couple of papers to do with our bachelor education. So I thought, I may as well get into Te Reo Māori a bit more. Yeah, so...
that's okay.
I know.
Now you're doing whānau openings with all the kind of...
Yeah, I was doing that, but yeah.
Extra option at university.
Well, that's where, the lecturers, really kind of did sentence structure and things like that. And really, it's been a long journey, actually, reading, listening, going to wānanga has been a real one. But it started there. And then it was just the process of just, I was even in one of your classes, I think, at AET for a little bit there. And
terrible.
But, it's just always an art that you're trying to craft. And so there's never enough time to dedicate to it. But
for what purpose, though? Why were you doing it?
At that time, my koro, who was living in Orākei, he hadn't quite developed the reo. And he was the generation where they were not allowed to speak the reo. And so he said to me, boy, you take my place, because I was the oldest out of Dad's kids anyway. And I said, yeah, I'm happy to do that. So it was that's what really sparked it for me. And then trying to hone the craft to be able to sit on the pie is a real massive goal of mine, continues to be today.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'm kind of there, but when I look at you guys and
But what is the ultimate purpose of that, though? I mean, I know sitting on the pie, and hey, some people love doing it just to be seen kind of in photos with Uncle Pat. But what's the real purpose of that? I mean, why? That's a means to an end. Right? What is the end?
Well, the reo almost died in Ngāti Whātua and Orākei. So when I looked at, our reo experts at the time, it was Matua Takutai Wikiriwhi, he was kind of the po of our reo. And knowing that we had a role as our generation at that time in our 30s to be able to step up and support Uncle, and and Matua Hugh Kāwharu and the likes of Matua Danny Tumahai, it was taking their place on the pie in the future and taking the load off them, because they have these demands across Auckland, and as you know, you have to go to so many openings, so many blessings, so many conferences in order to play your role as the host. And I just wanted to play that the best that I can, and that means, again, applying a bit of a sports analogy is training, it's learning, and then it's performing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Why do that role of so many openings, of going along and doing all these blessings? I mean, as you know, we went to one just recently, right, with the All Blacks experience with Mātou tourism at Sky City Grand, or Sky Grand Hotel. So why do that? Because it strikes me as being something that lots of iwi do, and they also, it's part of our role as mana whenua and all that kind of thing. But why such active participation for you?
For me personally, I think it's part of the historical journey of Ngāti Whātua and Orākei. So, one, it's practice of ahika. So, when we look back on our life, we can say, well, these are the instances where we were there to karakia for the whakatuwhera whare, or the whenua. And for us, it's a traditional practice, but in a contemporary setting, that we must maintain that in order for our traditional practice to be recognised in amongst these big corporate organisations. And to me, it's more than, we're not actually doing it for them, we're actually doing it for us to show that our kids, our mokos, that this is the practices of their matuas.
So what do you say to people who say that it's just, there's no real point of doing this? What do you those Pākehās, and there are a few of them, right, who have said this previously, this is a waste of money, this is a waste of time, it doesn't do anything, it's not giving us any kind of real definitive meaning in terms of purpose of our organisation. Why are we getting these people to come along and do this kind of traditional Māori thing? What do you say to them?
I don't really say a lot to them, because we just. But if I had to answer to them, for us, this is the practicing of who we are and our culture, and they're a part of the moment, because they'll be gone, 20, 30 years time that person will be gone, whereas Ngāti Whātua or the iwi will remain here forever. So they're a moment in time for me, for the continuance of our culture. So, with our Te Ao Māori, we're always looking long term, whereas they're short term sided thinking. I can understand where they're coming from, because they're just short term thinkers. This is a waste of time, this is a waste of my money to do this. But, there's a massive growing cohort of Pākehā who really, this is the missing part of their life actually. Really? Is their spirituality, or their wairua.
This is what they said to you?
Yeah, that invokes in them, that.
Wow.
Yeah, that changes their perception of the situation, whether it's karakia or mihi-mihi. The Te Ao Māori and our way of wairua is kind of like really invoking a lot out of Pākehā, especially
why do you think that is?
Well, I think they've been sold a bit of a lie, in their life, where everything has to be about profit, gain, me, I. Whereas they've found out that it's more than that, by interacting with the iwi or with hapu or with Māori groups, or with kapaka. It actually it invokes, a real ihi in them, which they've never really. And I guess that's what my dad found, right? He found that ihi, he found that wairua, and he really loved it. He loved whanaungatanga, and that's what I think, Pākehā is starting to embrace.
So this is getting to where I was hoping to get to in this conversation, because you're now a board member for Ngāti Whātua Orākei.
Yeah.
You're involved heavily in commercial business now, because you've gone from this career trajectory where you're now finding yourself in positions of huge responsibility now in the commercial sense. How is it that Māori gives a competitive advantage, an edge to business in a commercial sense, not just in Aotearoa, New Zealand, but go globally? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, that's a big question. I do believe that what we've got as a competitive natural advantage is our long-term view.
Long-term meaning what?
Long-term meaning that we don't need to take the first offer that's right in front of us. We can sit and wait and decide whether that fits into where we want to go in 50, 100 years' time. So whereas previously we didn't really have those, we had a short-term view in order to get to where we needed to be to get to the long-term. So I believe that Māori have that as a competitive advantage, that they don't have to always take the deal that's on the table. It's more about tradition. For me now, it's about whether our values match and our partnerships match in order to make the business happen. So I think that's something which commercial partners are starting to understand, whether our values and their values match in order to do the contemporary commercial world business. Because we're going to be in there for the long term, and we want to be with partners who are long term.
Give me an example where that's been the case.
Oh, well, in terms of Ngāti Whātua, with the purchase of we bought the Key Park, which is about 40 acres of CBD land back in 1990. So we always wanted to do partnerships with people that are on a long-term pathway. So we gave people a 15-year rent-free period in order to build commercial buildings. One of those ones it's been a real success has been Spark Arena. And in those days, we worked with the QPAM at the time and council to build this facility in order for the benefit of Auckland, because Ngāti Whātua, we only charge 50% of the ground lease for it. So we've taken we've taken a long-term view that this will be better for Auckland. The asset will keep growing in order for the benefit for Aucklanders and Ngāti Whātua in the future.
What is the benefit Ngāti Whātua gets from that?
Well, we get a land lease, we get access to the facility, we get something which improves the value of our land as well, in a stadium, and something that's a reputable brand that enhances the CBD, but also Ngāti Whātua in our role of playing kaitiaki o au mana whenua and tāmaki.
Wow. Is that what has also led to your involvement at Eden Park, home of many of my nightmares as a Wellington rugby fan? Home of many of my dreams being shattered by Blues teams?
Yeah. Well, Eden Park plays a special part for just about everyone, not so much for you, but but for you know, the park, what really appealed to me for being a board member on Eden Park and being asked there was just the history of it, you know, being at the side of our, you know, the maunga, so much history, Māori history there, Ngāti Whātua history, and then contemporary wise as being the, you know, the Garden of Eden or the fortress now. Moments in time in cricket when I was a kid there, you know, watching Richard Hadley, Ewan Chatfield, you know, John Wright and that, just great moments of time growing up. Going to rugby tests with Dad, you know, watching, you know, when at that time my first test, I just loved Ian Dunn, you know, first fire from Northland, you know, just winning the test against the British Lions. And that just, and then watching Auckland through the heyday, and then Harbour, you know, breaking away from Auckland, you know, so, you know, there's moments, and, you know, at the moment, with me, I just want Eden Park to embrace its Māori history.
How are you doing that? And what benefit of that is, what's the benefit that has come from that?
So what we're doing at Eden Park is we're looking at, through a Māori governance kind of approach, is working with the board to change or to have bilingual signage and naming for the park. That's one thing. We attracted Matatini, so we really went hard to go to attract Matatini to Eden Park. There were a lot of other stadiums going for it in Auckland. We weren't the best commercial deal for Matatini, but because of the mana and how we're going to support it through Eden Park and being on governance is key for me. Also just analysing our business and including more Māori kaupapa in it. So you'll see the kapahaka tours that are there. We're also having te reo spoken with our staff and trying to have that put through the park. So we've also got the big carvings out the front, you know, the four massive, probably the biggest, some of the biggest carvings in Aotearoa there that were at the four corners of the park. So they're really committing towards this kind of bicultural partnership.
Right, because a lot of people think of Eden Park and they think of Auckland Rugby, not the most Māori engaged organisation previously. They think of New Zealand Rugby, again, NZRU, not the most, well gee, you only have to go back to the 1980s and Springbok tours, right?
Yeah.
And people find that hard to let go of.
Yeah.
You know, they think of it, they think it's only, 40 years ago, less than 40 years now since some of that stuff happened, right up into the 90s, and they'll think, well, you know, why? Why try? Why do it?
Yeah, I just think the Māori history within rugby is really important, you know, with Waka Nathan, Buck Shelford, you know, these are heroes that used to run out on that field for us. And I kind of see through the colours, you know, I get where Auckland is at and what they used to be, you know, in the days with Zinzan and Michael Jones. You know, they were amazing times, but yeah, people do harbour a bit of that feeling against Auckland, and it's the whole Auckland thing, right? You know, when I travel out of Auckland and I go to other regions and they go, oh, where are you from? And I go, oh, I'm from Helensville. You know, I don't say I'm from Auckland too much, or I'm from Ngāti Whātua, because I just know straight away that there's this ill feeling against Auckland. But for me at Eden Park, it's not just about rugby and cricket, it's now about kapahaka, it's about, because I'm in the events game, it's about concerts, it's about Christmas events, it's about us welcoming in the city mission to distribute all the kai, so we're changing the whole away from rugby and cricket to be a more diverse stadium.
Oh, I understand it now, because when you look at the history of Auckland, particularly kapahaka, Rōpū Manutaki,
Yeah.
Wakahuia,
Yeah.
Ngāti Whātua Orākei,
Yeah.
world's best kapahaka, I'm told.
Yeah.
Got told in an event at Te Mahuru, but that's the case. I see now, I get it, right? That's a much better, much more engaging kind of story to have than just about rugby.
Yeah. No, well, the park itself, the history of it with the All Blacks and Auckland Rugby and, New Zealand cricket just being so strong. It has a wairua there too, if you regard on the field, and this is where, so many great battles have been won, 87 World Cup, 2011. But to me, the park should be more than just rugby, and that's why we're wanting to attract more Māori to come there. And that's my job on the governance, is to make sure it's a welcoming space for our Māori in order to be performed to the highest, with Manutaki, Te Wakahuia, Ngā Tūmanako. This is the platform to perform at the highest level.
Well,
and so we went really hard and attracted the event.
So I want to go back a bit then to governance, right? Because, governance is such an important role and responsibility. And, we're talking to an Indigenous community through this program, right? And governance is exemplified through a number of different ways across Aotearoa, New Zealand, and the Pacific, and to other Indigenous communities. For you, why do it? Because in New Zealand now we have health and safety, the commercial realities. We don't have access to the global markets to be able to get a higher return as much as everyone else can. In fact, most people just go to private equity nowadays because you're guaranteed a 7% provided Donald Trump doesn't blow the world up. So why do it? Why take on such lofty responsibilities?
Yeah, for me, when I built my company up for 12 years and we did some really big events and had, a lot of staff, and we're involved in the Rugby World Cup and, with the Waka Māori and building that, and then going to America's Cup and taking Waka Māori there. I thought I'd built enough business experience to then go, at 40, I thought when you get to the 40, it's kind of a key moment in your life around taking the governance step. And so at 40, I decided to, run for the elections for Ngāti Whātua Orākei Trust. I'd always been involved in the business around Ngāti Whātua and kapahaka, waka, uera, ngā mea katoa o Ngāti Whātua Orākei. I thought it's time for me to take my business experience into governance. And so for the last 6 years, it's been around, setting a direction and a vision for the next 5, 10, 50 years ahead for Ngāti Whātua, and being part of a team again of my fellow cousins who are trying to take Ngāti Whātua forward. So.
But why? So, for example, with a park like Eden Park, you've got some realities there that have real impact on you, right? You've got residents who don't want concerts there. I think the PM's a resident now, right?
Yes.
You've got some commercial realities that have real impacts on your ability to be able to do business and stuff. And I'm just wondering again, and particularly when you're Māori and you get into a governance role like in a commercial organisation, you become the Māori person.
Yep.
Do you know what I mean? I'm trying not to make this pejorative, but that's a reality.
That's reality.
Is that when you get onto a commercial entity, you become all right, now you worry about the language plan.
About that, yeah.
You worry about the professional development plan for staff in terms of things Māori and Māori engagement and all that kind of stuff. How do you stop yourself from being pigeonholed in that sense, while still maintaining a full gambit of responsibility for the board, but also trying to push Māori interests?
Yeah, for me, I'm there to be the Māori, leader on the board, and it's all about leadership. It's not about kind of doing the doing. It's about leading the organisation into the Māori, confidently into Te Ao Māori. So that's something which I've worked very hard at, but also equally working with the chairs of these organisations. So with Eden Park, I'm on an infrastructure company with Harrison Grierson, and now on AUT Council, which is a big full circle there.
Yeah.
It's about... they're quite surprised when because they pigeonhole you into Māori, but they're quite surprised when you understand the financial challenges ahead and the commercial decisions you need to make. And it's about assisting them or providing expertise in that area too, which I think is a bonus. But you are right, they do pigeonhole you, but when you bring a commercial angle to it, it's actually an added bonus to the organisation. which all the chairs that I'm on the board have been very supportive of me doing that. Yeah.
So I've been cagey about asking you this, but I think we need to talk about it because, particularly in Māori politics, being a governor can be tough. The constituent rights of Māori and Māori, those who appoint their governors, their expectations are higher than I think the commercial stakeholders and commercial organisations of their directors, right? Yeah. Because not only do you have to get the return, you've also got to do it in a sustainable way that's aligned with tikanga, that is mana enhancing to all of the whānau. We talk about the 5,000, 6,000 Ngāti Whātua, you are actually, accountable to all of them.
Yeah.
How tough is that?
Yeah, it is the toughest role.
Why is it the toughest role?
Well, it feels like everything's on the line all the time. That's why.
Every hui, eh?
Every hui is on the line. And Māori governance is the toughest governance by far.
Yeah.
That's given political, local council. I'm on local council governance, and Māori governance is the toughest space because your shareholders, your members are your neighbours, they're your cousins, they're your brothers, your sisters, your nieces, your nephews. And they're not shy on letting their view be told, whether it's to your face, behind your back, or on social media. Whereas I don't get that on other boards. You're there to do a role and you're recognised for your skill and they tautoko you all the way.
Right.
It's play your role. This is your role, this is your responsibility now. That's why you're here, and step up. Whereas on the iwi governance, it's a bit of different. Everybody's an expert at everything.
This isn't just Ngāti Whātua specific, right?
No,
you would have talked to other iwi. Is that similar? They have similar story?
Well, the beauty about, in the moments that we travel and, visit other iwi, it seems to be fairly consistent, that this is how it goes. And it needs to change, it really needs to change. You really can't have people taking pot shots at you, in a public setting, and because it impacts on the members, and it impacts on their wives, their husbands, their kids, their grandkids,
Some people would say that's the best form of democracy. It's direct democracy, straight at you. And you've got to be accountable, you've got to be transparent, you've got to be open to it. And if you want to get into those roles, you've got to have a thick skin. That's one view. What do you say to that?
Well, democracy is a bit of a new concept anyway to Te Ao Māori. It's more of a Western philosophy about how that's played out. And to me, I think a lot of the hara comes from a colonial base. So people that have been, and I understand that, people have been with their colonial arrival, Māori have led all the bad statistics around abuse and alcohol, drugs, income, etc., etc. So for me, I think that whole democratic way, when people are attacking you, it's not Te Ao Māori. To me, I think it's Te Ao Pākehā, or a colonial way of thinking. So I agree, we should always be transparent, always approachable, but it's the manner in which it's delivered that I disagree with. And challenge people that are doing it, because I don't think it's the way. Once you sit down with them, talk to them, reason with them, then you come to an agreement around where things are heading. So, yeah, but I just don't. Some of the AGMs that I've seen in different hapu and iwis, I think it needs to change.
How do you make the change? Can it be changed?
I believe it can, one day, but it's just working towards that. I think the stronger that people are in their cultural identity, their te reo, the way their tikanga, their role that they have within the iwi, that I think the more they get closer to that, because every time I feel that I'm closer to that, I feel I'm a better Ngāti Whātua person. And our kawa is not to stand up to me and to abuse and yell and scream and accuse. or falsely accuse people of doing things on boards. I just don't see that on other boards that I'm at other AGMs. It's quite measured, it's professional, lay your points across, and if you're not satisfied, then go to the next step. But yeah, I just think the worst thing that we can do as Māori is to keep wehe tata ki a tata, we need to just keep together rather than trying to separate each other and challenge.
I find this fascinating because Ngāti Whātua is a very successful, Ngāti Whātua Orākei, very successful. I mean, your returns, 10%, 11%, something like that. Your property, that's your portfolio, right? It's a property portfolio, massive returns on that, particularly with the developments that you were doing within Auckland City. And yet you're still saying you're getting this overwhelming sense from members at your AGMs, still not happy about lots of different things. Is one of the issues around the narrative that you create to bring people in to be a part of the conversation around the success that's been achieved? Or is it just a sense of it's going to take time to bring people along?
Yeah, with every iwi you have people that disagree with what the leadership are doing, and I get that. I totally get that. And the more you communicate, the better. I mean, communication is always the thing which is the downfall of a lot of iwi or discussions that break down. So, the more that we can build and communicate and talk with whānau and interface with them, and we're very lucky, because we do interface with our people on a very regular basis up at Orākei Marae, because we're always there, we're always having hui, wānanga, trying to bring them along on the journey. And outward looking in at Ngāti Whātua, very successful, very and commercially. The property portfolio is huge,
Look, I've seen some of your social programs, right? You've got health insurance going now with NIB and all that kind of stuff. So, and even your Reo program that you're developing, you've got wānanga. I think you were at a wānanga just recently, right? So you've got a lot of things going on. So what is driving the sense of pessimism, for a better way of putting it, right? The negativity. Do you think that's just the impacts of colonisation and intergenerational trauma, or?
I think that's part of it. I think part of it also is your family. So you're always putting pressure on your family because of the kinship ties you have. I'm always probably hardest on my brothers and sisters than I would be a business colleague, so.
Is that right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And they of you as well, I hope.
What's that?
And the same from them to you?
To me. And then the same from cousin to cousin. So there's always a better way, and I get their comments. And it is it's a minority. It's a very small, but we want everybody to come along the journey, and we're not always going to get it, but we're always going to strive to bring them all. We want everybody to be successful, and this is where we're heading as the leaders, and it doesn't always match up, but I do think that a common denominator amongst them is that the whānau that don't speak te reo, they're not there at the marae so much doing the roles on the pai or the karanga. So I think the more they get to do that and be on the marae and understand and really commit to Ngāti Whātua, I think all that stuff will dampen down a bit.
Oh, so in your view, it's the cultural development that should be, cultural and identity development, that's really crucial in terms of the changes that you think need to be made to get everyone along on the journey with it.
Absolutely.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because, we lost a lot of that in our identity with the growth of Auckland and Māori in general, across Aotearoa. So that's our number one priority in the next 50 years, is to invest heavily in our cultural identity, our hitori, whakapapa, te reo, tikanga. And the more we have people interacting with, and playing their role, the better it is for us. It eases the load off all the rest of everybody.
That's your prime focus for now?
That's prime focus.
Wow, that's good. Because when you were talking about that, been in situations. You're right, we are extremely tough on each other, eh?
Yeah.
You know, I've been in Pōheri where I've done a whai kōrero and someone will come up to me and go, oh, you said that name wrong or whatever it is. And yet, you know, Meng Foon and the Prime Minister get up and they do something, oh, they were awesome.
Yeah, awesome. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Oh, Meng Foon, the man. And you're going, hey, hang on a minute.
Yeah, that's exactly right. One thing.
You know, but so it is a fairly unique kind of characteristic, but I understand your point. You're right in that, you know, there must be a better way of doing this kind of accountability approach that we have with our own.
Yeah. I mean, we go on every 2 years a hiding of 19 cities across New Zealand and Australia. You know, that's the board members fronting it and hearing from the people, feeding in around all their whakaaro, their dreams, their hopes, their aspirations. And it's incredible that we're in a position that we can do that, you know, now at Ngāti Whātua Orākei, that we can do something like that. And we don't always hear the good news, but our staff and our leadership always are wanting to step up to try and alleviate what the pressures are. So we've done things like the NIB health insurance, you know, to cover everybody.
Yeah.
You know, the savings scheme, the health, the education, sports grants, you know, all our te reo programs. We're really lifting now.
Yeah. This is probably a really hard question to ask, but that ultimate kind of governance structure, right? Indigenous communities have different governance structures. There's been a lot of research done on this, and I don't think any of them have come up with what the ultimate Indigenous governance structure should look like.
Yeah.
Right? So let me ask that really simple question to you and hope you give me an answer in less than 10 words.
What is the ultimate?
Yeah.
Well, in the old days, there was the ariki, and then, you know, they'd have their leadership team ready to implement what the vision of the hub, and I'm sure that the people are feeding into those leaders too around the different areas. So we've kind of got a board of that now that's elected, you know, as opposed to whakapapa kind of entry rights onto the board. This is around whakapapa, but also elections. So I don't think that's quite right. I think an appointment I've always said that in lots of governances, they're appointed in the expertise in certain areas, and then they have their team to implement things. Yeah. So more of an appointments process of people that are experts in, I don't know, it might be te reo, experts in business, experts in health, experts in education that are there. Because I don't think you get the best on an election process.
Right, okay. Right.
And appointments ones would be.
Ah, interesting. Okay. Well, and again, the reason why I ask this is because in a commercial sense, you know, back in Māori governance still now, right, is when things go wrong, oh, well, let's get a Pākehā. Because they've got no bias, right, to one hapu or one marae or one whānau. Oh, get a Pākehā, they'll be sweet. In the commercial sense, it's the flip side of that now. It's, oh, let's get a Māori on our board because it gives a different perspective and, you know, yes, they'll represent a Māori community, but no one kind of stakeholder, political party kind of impact, right? And I don't know, I just thought I'd make that observation rather than to say I had a view on it. That's it, really. You can consider that and take that away. Okay, so in summary, I don't know how long we're going for time. It's all good. We'll go back to the rugby thing eventually. Yeah. We're 1 hour now. So to come back, you know, you lost your dad, I think it was last year. Yeah. And your mum a little while before that, right?
Yeah, 20 years.
You know, I'm sure they'd look back at their kids and be pretty proud of what they've done. But for you, you know, you talked about what they were hoping you would undertake, the roles that you've got. What would they be thinking now when they see you kind of on Ngāti Whātua board and on Eden Park board and AUT?
Yeah.
What would they be thinking, you reckon?
Oh, Dad will be, you know, Mum would be more expressive. You know, Mum would always, she was in Manutaki front row centre, you know, so she's Mrs., you know, performer, expressive. She'd be just really proud. You know, Dad would be a bit more stoic and say, you know, well done, boy, you know, get on with it and keep it going. They've always said that this path that we've got to lead is both Te Ao Māori and Te Ao Pākehā. So and the stronger that we do that, I think they'd say keep going in that area because you need both to survive in this city and in this world. So that would be their kind of view, I'd say. And Dad would just say, keep going, boy, there's lots more to do.
So to summarise or conclude this conversation, so I understand you surf.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't realise you were a pretty boy.
Yeah, water's been always part of my life. Growing up in Helensville, the river, eeling, fishing, rafting, and then we'd always be at Muriwai, Māori Bay, and Dad eventually we'd always be getting toiroas and mussels out there and then swimming, and Dad was a really good swimmer. So I took up surfing in my teens, and then when rugby came along, I kind of gave it away. And now, when I was about 15 years ago, I got back into it. So to me, hine moana and tangaroa is an incredible source of kind of laying stuff out in the ocean, We're all flash on the land, but once you get out there and you're in battle mode with hine moana and some big waves, you gotta have your wits about you. And so it's a real levelling thing for me to come out of the ocean after a couple of hours and kind of come back on the land. You've learned a lot out there. And I talk to other surfers or other sailors and the ocean,
Great.
And I think we need to connect with all our atua. And
that's a very good answer to a pitiful question. Well done. Look, hey, thanks for talking to us on Indigenous 100. Really appreciate it. We haven't had a governance perspective, so it's great to be able to talk to you about that. So the last question I'll ask, and it's pretty simple. So given you've lost the Hurricanes, 5 years in a row, I think it is now, if you don't win the next year, do you have to go off the board? Because I'm willing to sacrifice it so you can stay on, but I'm also, you can understand I'm in a bit of a bind here because there's nothing better as a Wellington rugby fan and as a Hurricanes fan than beating the Blues in Auckland. I don't know what that's about, except to say it makes me feel good.
Well, I must remind you of your Ngāpuhi whakapapa and that part of the Blues. So there's Ngāti Whātua Ngāpuhi that are part of the Blues. But luckily I'm not on the Blues board, I'm on the Eden Park. So we'll accept anyone coming in, including Wellington. And
well, you stole Bowden Barrett, so it's all fair.
Bowden knows where, he's going to make his most money. He's in Tamaki, so nā kua rea hoa.
Tēnā koe hoa. Tēnā koe I whai wahi mai koe kia mate. Me o whakaroa e pāna ki ngā take kōrero hi e tāwei tēnei rā ngā mihi nui kia. Ia ora mai rā.